This is the second part of a presentation on 3 paradigms for understanding the root causes of terrorism. Each of these paradigms or models represents broad, general ways that people have made sense of the motivations behind the terrorist attacks on the United States and its Western allies in recent decades. Last time we considered Samuel Huntington's idea of the clash of civilization. His fundamental claim was that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the primary source of conflict in the international community would be across civilizational lines, rather than the ideological conflicts that had characterized the Cold War period. The implication of this for understanding 9/11 and other such terrorist attacks is that they are a part of a fundamental conflict or clash between Islamic civilization and Western or Christian civilization. It suggests there are very minimal possibilities for peacemaking because the sources of the conflict are not in any particular thing we do, not in any particular policies that the United States or its allies generate, but rather the conflict has to do with the very values that define our identity. They hate us not because of anything we do from this perspective, but because of who we are. And an implication here is that the fundamental source of the conflict is in Islam itself, not in some perversion of Islam, not even in Islamic fundamentalism. The problem for the West, according to Huntington, is Islam. Today, we will look at 2 other paradigms or models for understanding what they want and why they hate us. The first is called Jihad versus McWorld, and it's based in the work of political scientist Benjamin Barber. Then we will look at the idea of resistance to American empire as the primary motive for the terrorist attacks, and this is rooted in the work of military historian Andrew Bacevich. Let's turn first to Jihad versus McWorld. According to Barber, the fundamental source of conflict in the world is not a clash of civilizations, but, and here's his alternative, a dialectical expression of tensions built into a single global civilization as it emerges against a backdrop of traditional ethnic and religious divisions. We will make sense of this alternative to clash of civilization as we proceed. The place to begin is in understanding what Benjamin Barber means by McWorld, because it is McWorld which he thinks is getting a violent reaction called jihad. McWorld refers to the global civilization that Barber believes is emerging as a result of the processes of economic globalization. Now, economic globalization refers to the increased interaction of markets around the world, the freer movement of capital and of resources and of people and of marketing across national boundaries. Barber clearly believes that these processes of economic globalization are creating what he calls a new civilization or a new culture that's an alternative to those historic civilization or cultures to which Samuel Huntington referred. What is driving this economic globalization, Barber believes, is a market imperative, or what he calls a quest for ever-expanding markets. To some degree, ever-expanding markets through which companies can purchase the resources they need to produce goods, but more significantly, ever-expanding markets for the goods that they produce. Now, these economic processes are dominated, he says, by what he calls soft goods, as opposed to hard ones. That is to say, what he's really interested in, and what he thinks, the insight that he thinks is important to recognize here, is that these processes of expanding one's markets is dominated not by producing new products, but rather by expanding the demand for the products one already produces through marketing in what he calls an infotainment telesector, the purpose of which is simply to create more demand for your goods. And the way that demand for goods is being produced, he believes, is by promoting a particular American lifestyle or image that is promoted around the world, associated with the products that corporations produce, and therefore encouraging people to purchase these products as a way of associating themselves with this American lifestyle or image. Let's look at a couple of quotations that will give you a sense of Barber's writing style and what he means by McWorld. Consider this. McWorld, he said, is being borne in on us by the onrush of economic and ecological forces that demand integration and uniformity and that mesmerize the world with fast food, fast computers, and fast food, with MTV, Macintosh, and McDonald's, pressing nations into one commercially homogeneous global network, one McWorld, tied together by technology, ecology, communications, and commerce. Among the major players in this new international capitalism are the manufacturers of athletic shoes, Nike, Adidas, and Reebok. If they, quote, have their way, no one will walk at all without their products, and this will be a consequence of a lifestyle choice arising out of the manipulations of emotions linked to sports and winning, rather than to the satisfaction of needs linked to walking and shoes. The world's thirsty can drink water, just as the world's footloose walkers can wear ordinary old shoes. If they are to drink beverages that earn someone else an income, consumption has to be associated with new needs, new tastes, new status. You must drink because it makes you feel your choice, young, sexy, important, in, strong, sporty, smart, with it, cool, hot, as in cool, athletic, right on, part of the world, as in we are the world, as in we Americans are the world, in sum, like a winner, a hero, like a champion, like an American, which is to say, above all, fun-loving, as in blondes have more. The one reason you must not consume soft drinks is to quench your thirst. All this, I think, gives you a sense of what Barber means by the creation of demand through an telemarketing sector that that generates consumption through the association of products with an American image or an American lifestyle. And I think it enables you to understand that what he means by the single global civilization that he calls McWorld is not a rich alternative to the historic world civilizations, but rather a cheap, shallow, commercially created civilization, if you will, that's more of a particular kind of lifestyle rather than truly a civilization. Now, what Barber means by jihad is a variety of forms of resistance to this global culture, which is really not a culture, but simply a cheap, commercially created imitation of an American lifestyle. Jihad is resistance to all that in the name of various local sources of identity and values. That is to say, those primarily religious sources of meaning that have been the underpinnings of all the world's great civilizations. But often this resistance is in a very traditional, very conservative, very fundamentalistic form of that religious tradition, or those religious traditions. Several things about what Barber means by jihad are important to understand. The first is this. Though the word jihad is an Arabic word that comes out of the Islamic civilization and culture, Barber believes this jihadic reaction to McWorld is found within the West. Indeed, it's found within every historic civilization, and it's not just against the West, because the West is the primary promoter of this cheap culture called McWorld. Secondly, while jihad can manifest itself violently, it doesn't. The jihadic resistance to McWorld is not always and need not be violent. However, he has chosen a word in Arabic that means holy war. Um, and it is an Arabic word, all of which suggest that this jihadic resistance and this sometimes violent resistance to the world is most noteworthy coming from the Islamic world. But it's not just from the Islamic world, it's across all civilizations. There is a jihadic response even in the West. And that response need not always be violent, though, as the word jihad suggests, it often is. And consider this quotation: "Jihad, in this view, may grow out of and reflect, among other things, a pathological metastasis of valid grievances about the effects of an arrogant, secularist materialism that is the unfortunate concomitant of the spread of consumerism across the world. It may reflect a desperate and ultimately destructive concern for the integrity of indigenous cultural traditions that are ill-equipped to defend themselves against aggressive markets in a free trade world. It may reflect a struggle for justice in which Western markets appear as obstacles rather than facilitators of cultural identity." So, what do they want from this perspective, and why do they hate us? Well, what they want is to be protected from the corrosive influence of this cheap, consumeristic, Americanized lifestyle associated with McWorld. And they hate us because they see us in the West as the primary promoters of this cheap global culture and those who primarily benefit from us. So what are they attacking? They are attacking a cheap consumerist culture, not, as from the perspective of the clash of civilization, not our attachment to freedom and democracy and justice for all. That's not what they hate. What they hate is McDonald's, Macintosh, McWorld. So how might Barber's insights be appropriated within a Christian worldview, or how might Christians draw upon Barber's insights? One of the things I want to say at the outset is that in no respect should Barber's insights be seen as some sort of a justification for violence or a justification for terrorist violence in particular. Nothing about his perspective should reduce a Christian sense of outrage at terrorism. It does, however, reduce our sense that we have a stake in defending what's under attack. From the clash of civilizations perspective, what's under attack is freedom and democracy and justice for all. But that's not what's under attack, according to Barber. And Christians probably do not see themselves as having any stake in defending the cheap, commercialized, Americanized lifestyle, which he sees as at the core of economic globalization. To the degree that cheap consumeristic lifestyle, McWorld, defines who we are, Barber's analysis does call for us to change, to recognize the degree to which our own lives are being cheapened, and to resist it. The peacemaking challenge here is to think about how we might, as Christians, contribute to the weakening of the corrosive impact of McWorld, and how we might join with persons from the Muslim world and other civilizations in finding ways to defend ourselves against that corrosive impact, and finding ways together to weaken McWorld, so to speak. The third paradigm or model we want to look at is one that sees violence primarily as a response to American imperial policies around the world. The fundamental claim that Andrew Bacevich suggests is this: that the United States' capacity and willingness to exert its power globally in support of its economic and political interests produces hostility and opposition. American imperialism produces blowback. Islamic terrorism is simply one aspect of that hostility and opposition to American imperial interests. Bacevich was writing primarily in response to the Bush administration in the early 21st century, who in their national security doctrine explicitly affirmed American global dominance or hegemony and preventive war as a way of protecting that hegemony. That we had a right, according to Bush, to use military force to keep other nations from becoming powerful enough to oppose our interests. Now, in no respect, however, does Bacevich claim that this militarization of U.S. foreign policy, or this willingness to exert military force globally, was new to the Bush administration. Indeed, he saw it as really beginning under Bill Clinton, a Democratic president prior to George Bush. Bacevich notes, and others have noticed this, that during that time period and since, U.S. military spending is equal to the spending of all other nations of the world combined. And of course, the ones who are closest to us are our own allies. Bacevich pointed out that very often the United States, in justifying its very expansive and militaristic global posture, using the language of leadership, that we are simply exerting our responsibility as global leaders. Bacevich is suspicious of that language and suggests that it obscures the degree to which we exert our power simply to support and maintain American or U.S. interests. A final insight of Bacevich's is that while our ideals do matter, while in fact we do assert ourselves to promote freedom and justice and democracy, we do so only and primarily when that promotion of those ideals supports our economic and political and military interests. So interests, he would suggest, matter more than ideals, though it's not as if ideals do not matter. So the fundamental idea here is that the primary explanation for the violence directed against the United States, the terrorism directed against the United States, is that it is a response to our global dominance. It's a response to American empire. It represents a resistance to a frustration about that global dominance. What do they want? And why do they hate us? They want us out of their lives. And they hate us because of our willingness to assert our power and might in the pursuit of our interests and against what they perceive as their own. Now, what can be said about a Christian appropriation of Bacevich's insights? Recall, if you will, our discussion of the idea that the United States may have a unique theological significance, that somehow we are God's chosen nation. I think Bacevich's insights forces us to make a judgment about whether we really believe that the United States is chosen and exceptional, because that choice will determine whether we think American global dominance is a good thing or a bad thing. If chosenness or exceptionalism is affirmed in its evangelical or expansionist version, then U.S. global dominance is a good thing. And though the means may appear problematic, maintaining military superiority, they are justified by the end, the global triumph of a divinely authorized freedom. This version would tend, like the Clash of Civilization, to generate a tendency towards seeing the war on terror as a holy war, as a kind of crusade. And the only hope for peace, then, is a complete U.S. military victory. If, however, the idea that the U.S. is a chosen nation or an exceptional one is rejected, or even if it's only affirmed in its exemplary form but not its expansionist one, then it would seem that Christians should support greater honesty about the degree to which American policies have been driven by self-interest. It would suggest that the United States needs to work to strengthen multilateral international institutions like the UN, the World Court, rather than acting unilaterally and rather than simply trying to dominate those international institutions. It would mean that the U.S. needs to significantly diminish its global military posture. We have troops in countries all around the world. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should withdraw. And all of that, greater honesty, greater support for international institutions, a less aggressive military posture around the globe, all of those would be seen as contributing to peace. Let me conclude by suggesting that there is probably some truth in all three of the paradigms we've looked at. Certainly, international conflict and terrorism has religious or cultural dimensions. But it is probably more strongly driven by social, economic, and political realities, including resistance to the Americanization of global culture and American global dominance. Also, I think it should be said that there are probably some aspects of the truth that none of these paradigms capture, that none of them capture some of the important elements that are driving terrorism. The Roman Catholic Church, in Living with Faith and Hope, pointed to poverty as a primary source of what's driving international terrorism. That's probably not picked up or captured well in any of the three models we've looked at. Obviously, many terrorists are coming from nations in which their governments suppress political dissent, and so the idea would be that because they're unable to express their dissent against the direction that the world is going, their inability to express that dissent nonviolently produces a resort to violence, including terrorism. Also, many governments around the world are simply corrupt, and their leaders use their political power simply to enrich their own families and friends, and to govern by bribes and paybacks rather than treating everyone equally under the law. Some would say that all of that contributes to terrorism as well, but none of that may be captured well in any of the three paradigms. Well, in class, we will discuss your sense of the validity of each of these paradigms and how you think they contribute to our understanding of terrorism and to our discerning of possible peacemaking initiatives that could help to eliminate it.